This podcast deals with themes, languages, and situations that may not be suitable for young audiences. If you're under the age of 18, parental guidance isn't going to help you here. Welcome to Now Open the Podcast, the sex education podcast that's more sex than education. I'm Trisha.
My name is Kai.
And I'm Presh.
Kai, welcome back. We missed you so
Hello,
much.
I missed you guys too. How are you guys?
Been doing well, and I can't wait to catch up with you about
Oh my God,
your
same.
adventures in the States. But
Right.
let's save
It's
that
a
for the
great time
after
over
party. All right,
Alright.
so tonight's episode is about those verbal microaggressions that have been historically used to oppress marginalized groups. So this is obviously going to be a super fun and lighthearted show. Today we are talking about reclaiming slurs. We're also doing something a little bit special and different tonight. So to all those listening in, if you are a queer person who wants to join in on the show to share your thoughts and experiences, just comment "let me in" the comments, and I'll choose one customer before the show and the discussion starts to join us for the rest of the episode. So if y'all want to join in and be a part of this Now Open show, comment "let me in" the next 5 minutes or so.
Come in,
But
come
Yeah,
in.
please come in. We're open. But before we get into that, the newsstand. So
Alright.
Kevin
So
Balot's recent tweet. Oh, sorry, Kai. You know what? You're back. So why don't you share the news today?
Kevin Balot's recent tweet drew flack from the queer and trans communities last June 6, where she called out the organizers of Miss Trans Global PH, a pageant exclusive to trans women. Balot criticized how trans women have been clamoring for inclusion in beauty pageants like Miss Universe, which have only been traditionally reserved for cis women, while organizing trans women-only pageants. This is not the first accusation of transphobia against the former beauty queen. In a 2012 interview, Balot said it is asking for too much for trans women to join traditional beauty pageants.
Okay,
Wow.
so I kind of want to get your thoughts on this. And as I was writing this little news bit, I was finding it really difficult to talk about exactly what Kevin Balot did in her
Mm-hmm.
tweet.
Mm-hmm.
Because her tweet was very interesting. It just kind of compared, or it was like saying, yung mga organizers ng trans pageants, ba't
Mm-mm.
kayo nag-organize ng trans-only pageant when you've been clamoring for Miss Universe inclusion this entire time? It's kind of
Right.
like calling out their hypocrisy, or I'm not really sure what Kevin Balot's intention was there, but it was basically, you already have trans pageants and you're already
Mm-mm.
organizing them. Why ask for inclusion in pageants that have been reserved for cis women? So what is your thought on this, Kai?
For me, it's like, okay, diba, the creation of safe spaces is really like as what other Twitter people have been saying, na parang it's to level the playing field, right? But the point is to be able to it's a necessary step for inclusion to the mainstream. So safe spaces were expressed to be created to level the playing field, which is why we have those trans inclusive trans only pageants, right? But at the same time, it's not just about being in that one space separate from everyone, right? It's a step to include us into the mainstream, include them rather, include the LGBTQ plus community into the mainstream. So I don't really agree in being separatist about like things like this. And at the same time, it's like it puts that idea that beauty is exclusive for just like there's there's certain sense there's certain types of beauty that are exclusive for certain types of groups, when you know beauty should be celebrated in all its forms. You know what I mean? You see what I'm trying to say? Na parang I don't agree with Kevin Balot in saying that there should be a separate, like it should be separate. I believe that it's necessary to have these safe spaces first, but I think it's also important to remember that these safe spaces are to level the playing field with the mainstream, and in order for us to show na, you know we're we can be in the mainstream as well, and we're not supposed to be excluded from the mainstream. Parang ganon.
Right. Actually, Kai, I like what you said about beauty in all forms, because I think by including trans women into like a cis women pageant, you're going
Mm-hmm.
to be redefining the definition of beauty and femininity,
Exactly.
right? And
Exactly.
and I don't think people are ready for that. I'm not
Mm.
saying like it's an excuse, but like
Mm-hmm.
people, I feel like right now they can't wrap around the idea that femininity and beauty can be beyond the cis idea of what a woman is, right?
Definitely. Yes, exactly. Exactly.
To be fair, it is a really big ask of a pageant, let's say as Miss Universe, because that's the big one, right? And they
Mm-hmm.
historically did have a first trans contestant in the form of Miss Spain, I believe in 2018 or 2019, somewhere in
Right.
that range. So
Right.
they have included one trans woman out of a bajillion countries. But it is also a big ask of Miss Universe to be like, hey, let's celebrate beauty in all forms when they're not. Even if you did include trans women there, they're
Yeah.
not celebrating beauty in all forms. It's still the same thin, able-bodied, conventionally
Eurocentric. Yeah.
attractive, Eurocentric, and I think you have to be a single woman with no kids or some shit like that. Like you can't be a married woman. Like that's
I
why they
didn't
have a
know that.
Mrs. Universe pageant. So it's a big ask of Miss Universe, but I do see why a lot of trans women especially would want to see themselves represented on that stage, because that's the stage for
Right.
women's beauty, and it is so limited
Exactly.
already in how it is. So it's no surprise that they were limiting it to trans women, first to cis women for so long. But big ask of pageants, but minus that particular piece of criticism, it's very disheartening to see this coming from a trans woman. At least I believe that's how Kevin identifies. I know that she kept her birth name. That was a choice. But all the reactions I've seen to it are like, well, Kevin, if you don't consider yourself a woman, that's cool. So
Mm-hmm.
it's possible that Kevin doesn't. But just because you don't doesn't mean all these other trans women don't. So
Right.
very disheartening, because this can be used by conservatives as a talking point where, see, this trans person gets it. Trans mismo
Right.
na ang nagsabi na you don't need other pageants. So very disheartening to see that coming from a fellow trans person. So Kevin Balot, do better. So that was this week's newsstand. Now, sitting down. If you're listening live and like what you hear, you can join the discussion by leaving a comment below. And if we have time, we'll get to them as the show goes on. You can also join in on the conversation on the now open PH Discord server, where you'll be free to talk about anything and everything sexuality with like minded people. Respectfully, of course. You can find the link to the server in the episode description, and I'm adding a comment below. So earlier, I mentioned that if anybody wants to join in on the show and be our special guest for the rest of the evening to share their experiences, to just comment and we'll choose one listener. So if you miss that, that's why the early bird gets the worm. So I'd like to invite in our special guest for the evening, the first person to comment, let me in. Nick, are you around? Can you join the StreamYard?
Yes,
Okay.
nice talking.
Igalaw
Nick.
ang paso.
Pag nandito ka, Nick, magbuga ng
I like how
hangin.
instead of crickets, we have dogs barking in the distance.
Oh my god, I'm so sorry. Mommy, stop! Smart! Oh, you're embarrassing me. Oh my
That's
god.
okay. While we're waiting for Nick, Kai, why don't you tell us how it's been for you? halfway
Oh
across the
my
world.
goodness. So right now it's like 9. I woke up at 6 to kind of like get everything ready because I haven't been on the show for a minute. So I was like, okay, I have to, and I know a lot of things are changing. So I had to like review everything. And um I had to move a lot of things to get here today. And I'm really happy I did because I didn't really want to go to the doctor today. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna move all my appointments and come to Now Open because I miss it.
Well,
So
I'm so happy you're here. I've missed your face. It's been
I
way
miss
too
your
long.
face, dude. Like, oh my god. So like I'm not exactly in like cool America. Like I'd love to be in the coast, but I'm in the south, bitch. So it's
I'm
You're
so
in
like
sorry.
Florida.
I
You're in
know
Florida.
I'm not even like East Coast Florida, not even in like cute Florida, not like Miami, Florida. I'm in like Georgia, Florida. So it's like oh my god. I remember the other day I was like buying sandwiches and then like oh no, here. So there's one Florida moment where it was like I was buying stuff for my dog, right? And this guy tried to come in without a mask. And then the sales lady was like, "Sir, you have to wear a mask." And this guy straight up goes like, "I have asthma. I can't wear a mask." And I'm like, "It's happening. It's really happening. Oh my god."
It's real. It's not a myth.
Right,
No,
exactly.
Florida
It's
is
not a myth.
unfortunately not a myth. Okay,
Yeah.
so our special guest is finally in the StreamYard. Everyone, I want to introduce to you one of our top customers, really. Everyone, give
Our
a
suke.
welcome, a now open welcome to Nick. Bakit siya
He
nawala bigla?
disappeared.
Oh
He
my god.
disappeared.
Oh my god.
Okay, okay, he's back. He's back.
Wait, andito
Give
na.
a warm
Hello,
welcome
Nick.
to
I
Nick.
am so sorry.
That was
Something
so funny.
happened.
What's up? How's it going?
Hello,
Hello,
everyone.
Nick. Hi.
Nick, it's so nice to finally have you on the show after, you've been in the comments this entire time.
Yeah, yeah. It do be, it
Okay.
do be.
It do be. Okay, so I want to start this discussion off by saying trigger warning. Obviously, we're going to be talking about slurs today, so we will be referring to and we will be using them throughout the show.
Right.
So I'll try to use some of them once and then just refer to them by their I don't know. I'm not going to say the acceptable name, but the censored version of the name. But we will be at least mentioning these slurs at least once. So just trigger warning ahead. So first things first, we need to define exactly what a slur is. What
Right.
makes something a slur? These are just words, right? But how do they become a slur? So I want to ask our special guest here, Nick. What is a slur to you? Like, how do you know something is a slur and not?
For me, to differentiate a slur from any other word that describes a person, it has to be very derogatory. So you're calling someone this word as a means to belittle them, to insult them, to treat them badly, I would say.
Okay, that's pretty.
I
That's
hear
pretty
you
good,
that. I
concise
hear that.
definition. How about you, Kai? Do you have anything that you want to add to that?
Yeah. To add to that, I think what makes a slur is really the context within which it's like said, the intention behind what about behind the word, where it's like you could call someone like for example the way I've reclaimed the slur in my own life is like the term slut, right? Where it's
Mm,
like growing up it was always such a like it's thrown at me like it was like and it was hurtful, but thankfully I was able to like find a way to find power within that term as I got older. So I guess it's like the context within which you place the word, because you can throw it at someone and like it could be a slur, it could be something derogatory as Nick said, right? But you can also throw the same word in a different context and might not really have the same effect as a slur. So I think a slur is what exactly what Nick said within the context of trying to hurt someone. Yeah.
okay, that, that
Yep.
that seems pretty accurate as well. So I lifted this definition, I believe, from Wikipedia, the everyman source. So according to them, a slur is a word or phrase that expresses a negative, insulting, or degrading connotation, or even simply just a lack of respect towards a person. More often than not, they're part of a particular group that's typically marginalized. I mean, yes, you can have slurs against dominant groups. I think cracker It's so hard to think of slurs against white people, but
Karen.
cracker.
Is Karen a slur?
Karen a
Okay,
slur?
there's quite a lot of debate about that. So I won't say yes or no if Karen is a slur, maybe. But yeah, you have slurs against pretty much most groups, regardless of race, sex, sexual orientation, whatever. But what we're talking about tonight is specifically slurs targeted against LGBTQ.
Right.
So, what are some of the more common slurs you've heard that have been hurled against the community? What are the most common ones for you?
The most common for me at least is a fag, faggot, all that stuff. Yeah, fag. You're a fag. Shut up, faggot. All that stuff.
Yeah.
Ah, the dreaded F word. So I'm going
Yeah,
to be
yeah.
calling it the F word because I personally do not feel comfortable saying it as a
Yeah.
woman, but
Mhm.
that's just me. How about you, Kai? As a bisexual woman, what have you heard?
You know what? I think the one most annoying slur to me is carpet muncher.
I think
Like
it's
it's
hilarious.
annoying. I think it's annoying. It makes me so uncomfortable. It's like
I like the implication that men do not give oral.
right,
Only
exactly right.
women give oral. Only women are
Only
carpet
women.
munchers.
Jokes
Right,
on you.
exactly. It's a funny term, but at the same time, it's like it makes me like, why would you say that?
Carpet
Like,
muncher.
I don't know. It makes me very uncomfortable.
I think like for me the slur that's annoying. It's weird because it it's a slur, but I don't think it is. It's the word tomboy, you know.
Mm.
Ah,
But
yeah,
it could just be used to describe someone, like describe a girl who is masculine or like is like a
right.
boy. But then like especially here in the Philippines, like tomboy. It's like it's so annoying. Like
I have
stop.
something
You
about
have to
that.
say it in a
Yeah,
tone.
yeah.
Tomboy
How?
yan eh, ganon.
Tomboy.
Like my partner and I had a conversation about the word tomboy. She goes, I like it better when I get called tibo, but not tomboy because tomboy is more derogatory for me, she says. So I'm like,
Really?
Huh.
yeah. So like, at least in the way she grew up, tomboy was something parang ang feeling mo. But if you say tibo, it's more like, yeah, like it's more natural. Parang ganon. From what I've understood, parang that's how she kind of like explained it to me. So, but in a Western context, tomboy is not exactly a
Right.
slur, is it?
It doesn't
Right?
mean
I don't think
anything.
it.
Right.
No.
Mm-mm.
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
I,
Mm-mm.
I get I get it. I hear it being like thrown around, but it doesn't refer to somebody being like a tibo, I
Mm.
suppose.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Speaking of like Philippine slurs, this one's been like going around recently because of a certain K-pop group. A lot of people are bashing it. Bayot. It's
What
Is
is
that?
that? What
Bisaya.
does that mean?
So
It's Bisaya.
Ay. Oh.
actually,
Yeah,
Nikki,
no.
thank you for bringing that up as well. It's been circulating recently. I actually read this as Biot
Me
originally.
also, I was like, biatch,
Biot.
not the CH.
If I'm not mistaken, the correct spelling of it is Bayot.
I've seen that. I've seen that.
It's Bisaya. It basically means fag also. It means gay, effeminate, I think, if I'm not mistaken. But I'm sure it means like gay.
Actually, I was talking to my friend a while ago, and he said something interesting about it. That word was used pre-colonial times as like the third gender, and you know how
Mm.
our
Mm,
society
wow.
before was a bit more egalitarian. They weren't really like patriarchal or anything like that. So they saw this third gender as somebody equal, if not even higher, like the
Mm-mm.
babaylan. So that's what they call that.
So
And when
Biot was like a neutralish term.
yeah, yeah, and when the Spanish came, of course they don't like that, and they made it a slur.
It's basically saying tomboy in a derogatory tone.
Right.
It's like Biot,
I have a
you
question.
know.
Yeah.
I have a
So yeah,
question.
this is
Yeah.
yes.
Right. So like when it comes to bakla and gay, right? Like why because I've met people who would much rather be called gay and don't like the term bakla, whereas other people prefer the term bakla and don't really associate with the term gay. And that really got me thinking about how like the terms bakla and gay are not necessarily like, you know, synonymous. And for some people, one or the other is more offensive. Parang that's what it just got me thinking in terms of tomboy tibo, you know what I mean? So parang it makes me think about like how what makes a slur. And I'm excited to like figure it out as we talk throughout the night.
Well, I think a theme that's going to be popping up regularly throughout the show, spoiler alert, is that slurs can be very, very personal. So some things that may feel like a slur to somebody else is not necessarily a slur to you. Like you were talking about your friend who prefers the term tibo to tomboy, but I actually preferred the term tomboy to tibo, or basically the other way around, or some people who prefer gay or bakla, because yes, all of these can be used as slurs, but not necessarily except depending on the person. So that's going to be coming up a lot.
Mm-mm.
And yeah, even
Right.
the word gay, which right now we just used to say, homosexual, right? That still can be a slur depending on the usage. Like most of us here grew up in the early 2000s, right? So if you grew up in the early 2000s, you would hear "that's so gay" like all the time
Right.
about anything. Like you lost in a game, that's so gay. Or you didn't like the ending of a movie, that movie was gay. Like just if you didn't like something or it wasn't what your expectations were, or you were trying to like rib at something, you would just call it gay.
Or like for
And now
guys,
we just only use it as slurs. But sorry, go on,
Anything.
Nick.
like for this is coming like from the male perspective, because like growing up, patriarchal society. If my friends caught me crying at the film, hey Nick, that's so gay. Things like that. That's a classic.
Yeah, like actually in my outline, I put like under common slurs, gay in parentheses derogatory, because for us it's so we can just say gay, 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 but
Yeah.
like I think we have, if we can point to a term that has been more or less successfully reclaimed. I mean, not completely. Obviously, people still say that's so gay everywhere, but
Mhm.
um at this point, like I don't see the word gay as a slur anymore.
Me neither.
That's personally, I'm also not a gay man, so I don't have that particular experience. But some common ones for women, we have the word dyke. We had a comment here from Chase earlier, who when we asked what kind of slurs do you know, said that term for a wall that prevents floods, and I was like, damn. uh oh no, the other one, dyke, got it. Then we of course have well, for trans people, you have quite a few, right? You have the word she-male, which RuPaul infamously used to for several years on RuPaul's Drag Race. Whenever there would be like an announcement from RuPaul, it would be like, "You got she-male," and there was a lot of backlash at some point, especially considering RuPaul's like transphobic track record. So they removed that, and I don't know what it's called anymore. I watch it all the time. I don't know what it's called. There's also, of course, the word tranny. And then you have the word queen. There was a time when the word queen, like, yeah, we go, yes, queen now, but there was a time when you call a gay man queen, that was a slur. And then even our much beloved on this show, at least, the word queer,
Queer.
that used to be a slur, or it still is for some people, and it still is in a lot of places, but I identify as queer, and I
Mhm.
kind of just use the word queer as an umbrella term because I talk faster than my brain works, so LGBTQ is a bit of a mouthful for me, so I say
Right.
queer. So these are all some of the words that we've heard, and it's really interesting to see how some of these may have started out as very neutral terms, like the term bayot or the term gay, which used to mean happy,
Mhm.
and then got transformed slowly over the years, or maybe even quickly, into something that was derogatory. And now some of them aren't as derogatory as they used to be. Some are
Right.
still like she-male and tranny. Yeah, we don't use those words anymore. But the rest, like a queer, gay, the F word, like a lot of gay men love to call themselves F words. They call each other that. It's
Yeah.
kind of like the N word for Black people. It's like a way to refer to other people in your community. So before we go on to like how this has like impacts on the communities that are that are the target of these slurs, let's get a little personal. Have y'all ever been called a slur? What was your experience like?
Well, I've been called sir, but
You've been called a sir, but not a slur.
I think so. Uh, I've never been called dyke. Has anybody here been called dyke?
Me.
You've
Really?
been called a
Yeah.
dyke.
I've been called a
About me.
dyke. Like I remember it was when I was studying in the States, and then this guy goes, "So are you dyke? Are you a dyke? Are you straight?" And I'm like, you can just say lesbian. It's kind of weird. But then, like, I didn't correct them anymore, but it was like, okay. It felt a little awkward. And I think that's how you know it's a slur, or you know that the intention isn't like, I don't know. For me, it's like when I feel a little off about what you just called me, then I know I just got called a slur. But I think I've also experienced slurs not directed at me, but more of like knowing that I'm like a lesbian or a bisexual woman. That and um kind of knowing that I'm a sapphic, but still talking about like being sapphic in a derogatory way around me. You see what I'm trying to say? Whereas I remember I've been with people where I have stated that I am a sapphic, but they would still be like, yeah, these carpet munchers, I don't understand how they're what they're like. But it's like it's weird. It's just weird. Na parang you kind of state that of like your identity, and still they talk about it in such a way that is derogatory, which is disrespectful to say the least. But it's something that happens, I guess, with a lot of hierarchical structures, like family, and like in places like that. Yeah, so I've experienced it in that aspect. Yeah.
How about you, Nick?
I have been called slur a couple of times in my life, especially in an all boy school for in high school, because that was around the time when I realized that you know what, guys are pretty cool too. Uh, so when a classmate of mine found, I don't know, a batchmate of mine found out about it, he started like calling me a fag, and I know I'd like to think it was just one of those bro to bro pabiro, but I felt really affected by it,
Mm.
just because after how many years we've known each other in this school, we've seen each other, we've like played video games together. Only now that you found out that I started liking guys, you started calling me a faggot. So it's like, I don't know, man, that doesn't seem pretty cool.
Yeah. What about
You
you,
know what?
Trisha?
Your experience, Kai, actually reminded me of a lot of instances where I have been called a slur. It just didn't register because it wasn't like it was being yelled at me on the street. Like I
Right.
think I remember that.
It was like a microaggression.
It wouldn't
Yeah.
be like, "Hey, you fucking dyke." Like it wasn't like that. It would be in
Right.
conversations, usually with men on Tinder for some reason, who love to ask if you're a dyke. And it's like, I have my settings to men, so I don't understand where you got that information. But anyway, uh,
You know,
I've been called a dyke. I've been called tibo in parenthesis derogatory. Uh, like I remember one experience I had, which looking back also didn't really sit right with me. I was in a group, lots of men, some women in that group, but lots of men, and the men were joking around. You're like, "Oh, si Trisha, tibo, tibo," and I'm like, "Yeah, tama." You're
and
correct. Facts only. Obviously, didn't say that. That was like 2012, so we didn't have the language. But it was like, yeah, yeah. And then they stopped. They stopped ribbing, and I'm like, oh, okay. So were you just trying to make me defensive or weird? Because when I accepted your slur, and I was like, yeah, they stopped. So it's very interesting. That's just a very
Hmm.
interesting I guess experience that I've had. But yeah, I think I've been pretty lucky. If I have been called a slur, it hasn't affected me to the point where I remember it.
yeah, dude, me too. I don't remember a time where I've been called a slur and I noticed it, but I have been asked by many children in the past. Literally, they'd
Yeah.
come up to me and they go, "Are you a boy or a girl?" And then I tell them, "Oh,
Yeah.
honey, I'm both." And they're like, "Okay." And they just walk away.
Yeah, I feel like kids have a way. It's not necessarily a slur because I know that
Yeah.
like it's an innocent inquiry into what I'm doing or what I am. I remember I went to this Aita community with my ex, and this one little kid comes up to me and goes, "Babae kayong dalawa?" And I'm like, "Yeah." "Nagmamahalan kayo?" And I'm like,
Oh,
So sweet.
"Oo."
that's
Because
such a cute slur.
super cute. Where it was like, because we were really like PDA, right? Like, oh, mama like making out, but like we were holding hands, we were hugging, and she came up to me and asked me that, and I was like, it's not a slur, but I like the curiosity there. Like I like the curiosity and the just what is happening, you know?
I will say though that kids can parrot especially transphobic views because
Yes.
growing up, like I was a very tall girl. And it's weird. I had boobs. I had boobs, but I was a very tall girl and I have a low voice, and I've always had a low voice. Like even in
Mm-mm.
grade school, okay? My voice just was already at an alto and then I dropped my
She's a
balls.
baritone, folks.
I'm a baritone now, but even in grade school, I had like a very deep voice. I wasn't even an alto then. But I would constantly get mistaken for a trans woman. You know, they would call me a man in a dress, and it's children, and you can't be mad at the children because they're children, and society will look at you weirdly if you like punch a child. So, not that I was going to punch any children, but you know, I just had no recourse. Like one time I was on my way to my graduation and I was in makeup. My mom decided to do my makeup. It was awful. And I was sitting in traffic and this kid literally from the street just comes up to the window and then it's just like bakla, bakla, and then leaves. And I'm like, oh my God, it's not even, I'm a woman. I mean, a girl, you know, it was, and that really did not start my graduation off on the right foot.
Oh
It was
no.
supposed to be a very good day for me, but I was just sitting there like this little child called me bakla. And you know, I that did not feel very good to me because it
Mm-hmm.
meant like I looked like a man in a dress and a man in makeup, and I did not. I'm a girl. I don't want to be mistaken for a man. So you can see how like slurs are even like lobbed at people that it does not apply to.
Mm-hmm.
Randall commented, I can say that even cis straights are not immune to slurs. I have been labeled gay in high school. This is true. We see this all the time. Like people preemptively labeling you because of certain expectations of masculinity.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
I have friends like this where they would just openly in front of him discuss his sexuality and insist that he was gay, even though he's never been interested in men.
Right. And like, you know, I feel like kids even aren't immune to slurs. Cause like I have this family friend and her daughter's very like, you know, very like she's very rough. She likes to play with the boys more than they just like to wear dresses. That's her thing. She's like 4, right? And then like her mom was like ranting to all of us and she was like, yeah, she can do whatever she wants, but dear God, if she turns out to be a lesbian. She
Oh
went like
no.
that. You know what I mean? So like
Lesbian derogatory.
yeah, lesbian derogatory. Derogatory. Parenthesis. But like, you know, kids aren't immune to it. I mean, I don't think it's like, at least in my experience, it wasn't said to them, but just the thought of them turning out to be a slur is something that scares certain parents. You know what I mean?
So I want to ask, how did being called the F word or a dyke or whatever make you feel when it happened to you?
Oh, it's a therapy session. Okay.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Here we
Well,
go.
doc.
It's free
Well, doc.
therapy. Please go.
Nick, you go first.
Yeah, well, like what I said earlier, since I've known the guy for like how many years in high school, he started calling me that. It's like, pare, parang di ko alam kung are you insulting me? Is this like a new nickname for me? I don't know. So like, I guess it's one of those things in the back of my mind. Like, I just pushed to the back of my mind. Nah, it's just bro to bro shit. You know, high school, all boys stuff. Boys will be
Yeah,
boys kind of thing. That's how I thought about it.
right.
I guess it's not. I guess it's not anymore. Looking back, it
Yeah,
was bad.
right. I agree. Like I that because it happens a lot. Like, you know, like in my family, like they would it happens a lot that there are conversations where it's very anti-LGBTQ and they know that like, you know, I'm a sapphic, but they continue to talk about these things in front of me and around me and they talk about it in very derogatory ways and it feels very invalidating. It feels very like I feel unseen, unheard. I feel unvalued. Where it's like, you know, coming out in itself was hard. Coming out in itself was already tough. And I know that coming out is a process, but to see and to experience that, even though I have built up that courage to tell you, like, yeah, you know, this is who I am, um, for you to still continue on and be derogatory towards like my sexuality feels very invalidating. I think that's how I feel about it. Especially when it comes from people that really matter and really like you really care about. For example, with Nick, I don't know, I'm not speaking for you, but I'm sure that it was like a weird experience and an off experience coming from someone you're really close to, right? So that's kind of how I feel about it, where it's like it's off. Like it's like what
Yeah.
why? Like what why? Why do we do this? Bring it on.
I understand because whenever I'd be called a slur, even if the slur doesn't apply, like bakla, like I'm not a gay man by any means, but even that made me feel terrible because, yes, on the one level, you're dealing with the personal attack
Mm-hmm.
of all the assumptions that they're making about you now that you know that they're making in their head
Mm-hmm.
um, by calling you that label. But
Right.
also, it makes you feel bad about all the other. I feel like being called a slur, especially by a straight person, you know that that's just the tip of the iceberg. So
Yeah.
you know that that's just the
Yeah.
tip of the shit that this person's going to be giving you. So it already puts me on the defense with that person. So
Mm-hmm.
it makes really impossible to make a connection with them for me at least because if you can easily call me a dyke, what else can you do, you know?
Right. I
But
feel like
unfortunately, sorry, go ahead.
right. Just going off from that, I feel like if I would feel very stereotyped, I suppose. I mean, because a lot of people don't understand the queer community and what we're about. It's so easy to just say like, "Oh, bakla siya," or "tibo siya," just so that they can put a label on it, just so that they can categorize you in a way that they can understand. And it feels very, yeah, that it's derogatory, I suppose. Yeah.
I think it's really easy to say that these are all just words, water off the duck's back, sticks and stones, blah, 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 right? But a lot of studies have shown that words can hurt, not even
Mm-hmm.
just slurs, words in general do hurt. Okay, you don't have to
Mm-hmm.
call somebody a slur to hurt them with your words. But slurs in particular, especially with the word gay. So this was I think it's a 2012 or 2014 study. So it's a little bit older. I hope we've progressed since then, but according to the study, 5% of teachers and 49% of students in elementary school, so these are young children, hear the term gay used in a negative way by other students. That's half of students, making it one of the most commonly heard examples of biased language overall. Like out of all the slurs, racial, whatever, it's the word gay. And it's really hard to deny the outcome of this kind of language, especially because students who don't quite conform to gender or sexual uh, norms are more afraid and are more likely to not want to go to school because they're scared of their safety,
Mm-hmm.
because they'll be bullied and called names more. So compared to 33% of students who just don't want to go to school for random bullying reasons, 56% of gender nonconforming students don't want to go or are afraid to go to school because of the verbal assault that they already expect they're going to get when they go to school. These are grade schoolers. Oh my gosh, these poor children. So many other studies have also shown that repeated exposure to slurs against the queer community does result in homophobic attitudes and behaviors, including avoiding queer people because of the negative associations with the term. So even just saying something like that's so gay, where gay equals bad or some other negative meaning, can condition people to think that homosexuality is bad, uh, especially when the people who are using it are not interacting with the group in question. So let's say it's a bunch of straight boys calling each other gay in Dota. Wow, or Valorant or something. Like, outdated reference in Dota. People still play Dota, but anyway, and they're using this amongst their group because and there's no gay people in their group. They're more likely to be able to use it without any consequence because there's no gay people that they think that they're hurting, because the gay people aren't there to hear it, but it's creating these attitudes in these groups. So it's so do slurs have impact on you psychologically and as a society? Yes, these aren't just words. I think we've covered this multiple times in the podcast, that words aren't just words, people. They mean
Amen.
something and they have lasting impact. You cannot take them back. So Before we move on to the rest of the discussion, let's listen to a clip from Fresh, a band that fuses pop, alternative rock, and dreamy melancholy to set the stage for sweet stories of love, loss, and coming of age. This is, I'm sure you've heard this before in the podcast. Give it up for Don't Run. So if you
Beautiful.
that was beautiful, wasn't it? One of my
So
favorite songs.
beautiful.
Super.
That music video was so gay.
That was so
Not
gay.
derogatory.
Not derogatory.
Not
Not
derogatory.
derogatory.
So if you like what you hear and you want to support your beloved sexual delinquents, you can send us money like the whores we are. For less than the price of one cup of bougie coffee per month, you can keep your favorite sex podcast up and running for many episodes to come. It comes with a lot of goodies like extra content, special shout outs, and exclusive access to a VIP customer channel on Discord. You can even suggest an episode like what Randall did for Rule 34. So it helps us a lot and we really appreciate it. But now back to the discussion. So earlier we talked about what makes a slur, what are the common slurs you had in your experiences experiencing slurs or having slurs hurled at you. But I want to start this part off with, I guess, the main topic for tonight, which is reclaiming these harmful words that have been used against the queer community. So, do you think, as queer people yourselves, that there's power in reclaiming a slur?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah,
That's so
definitely.
fast.
Yes.
Okay, so the episode's
And
over.
what
I
about
guess.
it? No.
All right, thanks everyone. We have a consensus. We're done. Okay, so what kind of power have you experienced in reclaiming your slurs? Have you reclaimed any for yourself? If so, what? And what's been your experience in doing so?
I can start, I guess, because like I
Yeah.
have on the top of my mind, I already have a story to tell about that. So in high school, I was gay because I started liking guys, even though I like girls also, but that didn't matter to them. So they called me gay. They called me the F word. But in college, when I started being a hoe, being a slut, owning it also. When people say, "Dude, are you gay?" Like, yeah, I love it. So it's like just owning that term that they used to call me, that they used to tease me. "Ha, suck a dick. Yeah, I like it too." So it's just like it makes me feel tougher, makes me feel stronger, makes me feel so much more better than I was in high school, at least.
Mm-mm.
That's awesome. Congrats to you for having the balls, the
Thank you so
proverbial
much.
gendered balls to to stand up to them and claim that. How about you, Kai? What slurs have you reclaimed?
So it's not necessarily like it's not necessarily related to being queer, but as I said earlier, like growing up, like the word slut was like something thrown at me constantly. And why not? I was really a slut, diba? But at the time when they first called it to me, I still am a slut. I mean,
Slut derogatory.
slut derogatory dati, but now it's like um before it was like they'd throw it at me because yeah, I was a slut, and at the same time it wasn't something that I knew how to own at the time. And it was painful because they threw it at me as something that to hurt me. But when I was able to find ways to be like, you know what? When you actually like what Trisha did when people called her that, she's like, yeah, I am. The way Nick was like, yeah, I am gay. When you actually say na parang, or when you claim the word and you're like, this is actually who I am. I thoroughly enjoy sex. Like, and you actually claim that and be like, I am a slut. And it took me years to get to the point where I could say na I could use the word slut and not feel hurt about it. Like looking back at like 15-year-old guy who was always like crying about being called a slut to who I am now, and parang I still am a slut, but I don't I think it's something. It's so neutral to me now.
Right.
At one point, it was really like, yeah, I'm a slut. I'm a fuck all y'all. But now it's just like, but now it's like, I think there's a process to reclaiming a slur. There's a time where it becomes negative, and then there's a time where you're so into it and you just want to be like, I want to throw it in everyone's face, and
You have it
then
tattooed on your arm.
yeah, you
Slut!
have to be like, slut, you know, with with the band around your arm, and it's just like
Like,
it's
slut.
kind of yeah. Um, and then it comes to a point where you're just like it's neutral na lang. It's like yeah, it's just there.
Right.
It's like it
It's
loses
an
its power.
adjective or a
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
it's
noun.
like you
I
know.
do agree that like these words are neutral. Like words
Mm-mm.
are just letters put together, right? But
Right,
the reason why they hurt so much or they affect us is because of that weight that society puts into those words. Like for
right.
example, like I'm looking at what slut means like in online. A woman who has many casual sexual partners.
A
Okay,
woman.
yeah, a woman.
A
It says that
woman.
on Google, according to Google, right? And men can be sluts too. Okay. Anyway,
They often
right.
are.
And
Mm-mm.
and you read this, and it's like, yeah, okay, good for her, right?
Right.
But but because of the social stigma that people think that having many casual sexual partners is a bad thing, that's when it becomes a slur. That's when there's weight put into that word, and that's the thing that we allow ourselves to be harmed by, right?
And just
And
to add to that, sorry, go ahead. Sorry, cut you
yeah,
off.
no, no, go ahead, go ahead, go
Yeah,
ahead.
just to add to that, I think now that you say that and how society would kind of like put pressure on certain words and we kind of take on that pressure, I think one of the aspects to reclaiming a slur is to creating a definition for your own self, a definition that works for you, whether or not that falls in line with the slur, whether or not it falls in line with the slur, or if it's a whole other meaning to it. I think the point is you recreate that definition that works for you and you own that. And I think that's kind of what um goes into reclaiming a slur. But also to note, not everyone has the capacity to reclaim a slur. For some people, it's really something that just is painful and they don't want to reclaim a slur. But then, I think going back to what I was saying, like reclaiming a slur has a lot to do with looking at society's definitions of what these words are and saying, you know what, fine, sure, but I'm not gonna take that. I'm going to make it my own and see how it works for me.
So, to everyone listening, I guess we should also define what reclaiming a slur means in this context.
Right.
So, there's many different ways to reclaim a slur. Sometimes just self-identifying as one is good enough, but basically the process of the fancy term for it is linguistic reappropriation. So,
Wait.
linguistic reappropriation is the process by which a marginalized group or a disenfranchised group reclaims words that were previously used to harm them, and then the word becomes positive or neutral over time. And I wonder if, obviously we look at this in some ways as empowerment. It allows us to empower ourselves in small ways because we can't change how you think about us, but we can at least remove a word from your vocabulary that can be used to hurt us. But I wonder if it's also a form, it's a form of protection, kind of like cognitive behavioral therapy, where it's like I can't change the way that other people react and relate to me, but I can change how I react and relate to that.
Mm.
So instead of crying and sitting there and being hurt at the slur, which is a monumental waste of time and your energy, you're the only one who's mad about it. It's like, drinking poison, you're poisoning yourself with that anger. So instead of being angry about that, you reclaim the word. Now no one can hurt you and you can focus your anger on the issues that you can change, the issues that
Mm-hmm.
forward bigger change for the
Mm-hmm.
community. I wonder if it's a kind of like a protection spell for the community. It's like, oh well, fuck it, we can't fight this, so let's just use it. Let's just use
Mm-mm.
it. So I think one interesting thing with reclaiming slurs, so there's always this conversation about should we reclaim slurs, which we'll talk about later, but I think in some ways reclaiming slurs isn't even just about turning a negative thing into a positive thing,
Right.
especially because a lot of these words didn't have negative connotations to begin with.
Right.
So like the word gay didn't really have any negative connotations associated with it until it was associated with homosexuality
Yeah, but wasn't
in
Right.
it
like the
like a
20th
good thing?
century.
Didn't it mean happy?
Yeah, it just
Yep.
meant happy. And then eventually it meant homosexual man, like
They
neutral,
seem
and then it
cool.
meant homosexual man derogatory. So in some ways,
Uh,
reclaiming can be seen as restoring the original intent,
Also,
you
I
know?
think yeah, I think reclaiming a slur also has to do with taking away its power, and that goes for both ways. Na parang I feel as though yeah, you can be super like if you put so much negativity into it, it's still a power. If you put so much like positivity into it, it's still a power. And either way, you're absorbed in a certain sense of power. But when something's neutral, it's like you don't. It's free for definition for different people. Gets mo ba? Na parang I feel as though reclaiming a slur is taking away the power of definition into a term and allowing people to put their own definitions or restore their original definition to it, um, without having to inject like or box in the term into a certain like greatly negative or greatly positive thing. I think it's moving towards a neutral stance on the term. That's what I think, at least.
No,
Yeah.
that's very true. When you reclaim a slur, it's you're not reclaiming all the negative things that come with
Yeah.
it, you know.
Right. Right.
You're
Right.
Yeah.
saying this is the word and this is the new meaning. And this
Mm-hmm.
is the meaning that the community has decided it's going to be, not you straight people. You know,
Mm-hmm.
we're gonna define our own labels. Thank you very much. We can do it ourselves. And this really removes the harm from the word. And I think it allows for greater progress because you don't allow the word to contaminate discourse. Like the
Yeah.
discourse isn't anymore about the word. You're moving on to the more systemic, issues of homophobia and transphobia. It's like, okay, let's not talk about the words. The words are important. But if you're going to continue hurling insults at me, let's defang that and let's talk about the real issues here. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's also really important to reclaim slurs because even if there's a lot of discourse right on Tumblr, on Twitter, should we reclaim slurs? Why are we so attacked to reclaim something that's so negative? But I think it's really important because it starts a discussion on the history of the terms, because you'll see this pop up on your feed and you're like, okay, well, what does it really mean? Where does this come from? And then it just like really makes people more aware of, not just the history of the term, but the struggles really the community has faced over
Yes.
the last several decades. So let's talk about some of the controversies in reclaiming slurs, because I find this particular topic, this kind of discourse, really interesting. Because initially I had thought, yeah, reclaiming slurs, empowerment, let's go, let's do it. But there have been some voices saying, why?
Mm-hmm.
Why not just ban them, and agree that it's a bad word?
Mm-hmm.
So, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think there's some harm potentially in reclaiming slurs, or do you think it's just go, go, go all the way?
I personally think that it's not like reclaiming a slur is something that for some people might find empowering, whereas to other people might just cause more trauma. You know, like as you said, Trisha, there's a lot of history that goes into these words, these terms, and like to reclaim it has to do a lot with going back into what made it hurt in the first place, what made it a slur in the first place, and having to find like power in that. And sometimes it's not everyone can do that, you know. And if I may, and I'm not saying this as like a derogatory thing, or I'm just saying this as an example, okay? For example, would you we can we ask comfort women to reclaim the word comfort women, like given the history that's behind um their experience, you know. And I think the experiences to these slurs are different for everyone, you know, like. And I think that's the harm in forcing people to reclaim us, or not forcing, but like make or advocating for everyone to blanket advocate for everyone to reclaim a slur. We don't know the individual experiences people have with these slurs. So I think, you know, the harm in advocating rather to tell people na reclaim the slur is we don't necessarily interrogate like what is behind it for these people, and do they have the capacity to go through what happened to them and find power in that, you know. That's I think what the harm is in it.
All right, I totally agree. one thing we definitely don't advocate on this podcast is to have blanket statements about anything because the
Mm-hmm,
human
mm-hmm,
experience is so diverse and varied. So, I use the term queer to refer to myself pretty liberally, but somebody else might not like being called queer. So just because I'm fine with it doesn't mean another queer person's fine with it. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. But I guess one really big question that has come out in this discourse is who can reclaim slurs, right? So
mm-hmm.
this is the really important part, right? Because we have to acknowledge that not everyone can reclaim a slur for everyone. Like Black people may have reclaimed the N word for themselves, but that does not give white people and non-Black people the license to use the N word in everyday conversation.
Mm-mm,
So
mm-mm.
to you, who can reclaim the slur?
It's a contentious topic.
For you personally, there's no wrong answers, unless there is.
I feel like if you've ever been called that, I don't know. I feel
The
like I might say the
marginalized
wrong
group,
answer.
I think.
Right, right, right.
Yeah. If you like been for me, I would like to think I can reclaim the certain slurs that have been used against me and against my fellow LGBTQ community members, something like that. I mean, that's how I think, how I feel about it.
Like I feel as though people who like who can reclaim a slur, in my opinion, is the people who that slur was originally directed at. Like for example, like when you say, like I personally find it weird when someone straight would be like, I feel like looking dykey today. I'm gonna go put on some dyke clothes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
it's not your word. Whereas like if I see like someone who's a lesbian that goes like, yeah, I feel dykey today. I'm gonna put this on. It feels more. I don't know. That's how I feel about it. I feel like certain slurs are meant to be reclaimed by people who that word was originally intended to hurt, because that was,
Yeah.
yeah. Because reclaiming means you want to reclaim it for, like, you want to reclaim it to and make it, give it a different meaning, Parang ganun yung pag-intindi ko eh. So like, why would you reclaim something that never had an initial meaning for you anyway? Gets mo ba? Parang that's how
Yeah.
I think about it. That's how I think about it lang. Right? That's me.
Let's just put a pin in the dyke discourse specifically because I want to continue on that. But before that, we want to say thank you so much to Nick, who's joined us this evening.
Thank you,
It was
Nick.
such a joy having you that I think we might do this semi regularly where we invite a customer to guest on the podcast for certain episodes. So if that's something you've enjoyed listening to, please let us know in the comments. And if a lot of people comment that they enjoyed it, then we'll continue doing this. And maybe more of you can be on the show. I would love to see your faces and meet you
Yes,
in
please.
virtual life. All right. Well, thank you so much, Nick. And I hope you
Bye,
have
Thank you
a
very
Nick.
much.
Have a
great
great
evening.
evening.
Bye.
All right, everyone say bye to Nick. Okay, so we put a pin in the dyke discourse because that is actually the reason why I wanted to do this episode, specifically because of the word dyke. So there's been this. Oh, I want to say hi to Dora, who's in the comments right now. Hi, Dora. Thank you for joining us.
Hello.
We miss you. Please come back. Okay, so um, the reason why I wanted to talk about this tonight is because I've seen this discourse come up on Twitter maybe over the last couple of years where there's been like this the claim, the argument is that unless you are a lesbian, not bisexual woman, a lesbian, purely homosexual, you cannot use the word dyke or you cannot reclaim the word dyke for yourself. What are your initial thoughts on that argument?
Wait,
I
what
really
does
want to hear.
dyke mean? What does dyke mean?
No, just
You
but
know,
we can
it's
get into
like,
that. We can get into what dyke means later. But
I
from your
think,
understanding of the word
yeah.
dyke,
There isn't, like, as you said, first I feel there's a history to it, right? So we take that into consideration. And second, this reminds me of the intersecting aspects of identity. Na parang, for example, I've seen this discourse on Twitter that talks about how um, the Latino and Black lesbian community don't want people, or certain people in that community don't feel comfortable with people who are non-Black or Latino claiming the word stud,
mm,
because that's meant I've read somewhere that it's been that the word stud is generally to refer to black or Latino lesbian, or certain lesbian women who are black or Latino. And I think it kind of reflects this argument on um the dyke situation, where it's like, um you know, for call it, given the history of the word, and I think you're gonna explain that in a bit, given the history of the word and the intersecting aspects that come into of identity that come into the word, like, it goes back to the question of who can reclaim the slur, and who are the people who have been who the slur has been directed at, for them to reclaim it. Gets mo ba? Parang I feel as though I it's we have to be able to see who was or not most affected, but who was this slur originally meant to hurt. And I think that's the group that should be able to reclaim it, at least, you
That's
know.
interesting.
That's
Yeah.
what I think about it, at least.
Sure. I guess the contention around the word dyke specifically is that the supporting argument to bisexual women can't use the word dyke is the alleged supporting argument is that dyke is used to refer to women who have a lack of attraction to men. So it's not, you like women, it's you are not attracted to men. That is the supporting argument according to the people who claim that you cannot use dyke unless you are a lesbian. So I found this quite interesting because it's not correct. It's not. It's ahistorical at best. Those are the words I will use. Ahistorical at best,
Mm-hmm.
because this is why I think the discussion around reclaiming slurs is very interesting, because that's what actually, this is where I found out this history of the word dyke. And I have an affinity for the word dyke because I used to identify as a lesbian for maybe around 10-ish years. And then at some point I'm like, I guess I'm not lesbian. I like men too. So I'm going to call myself queer. So
Mm-hmm.
that's where I'm coming from. I used to actually be a dyke by the very strict definition of it. And then now I'm a bisexual woman. So where does the word dyke come from? Well, there are multiple theories as to the origin of the word dyke. Most of them have one commonality, and it's not a lack of attraction to men.
Mm-hmm.
It was basically just used to label women who didn't conform to society's expectations. Kind of like the
Oh
way we
my
use
God.
witch, or I don't know why witch is the only one I could think of. But yeah, basically, it's just a woman or a spinster, sort of like a woman who does not
Right.
conform to society's demands. And one of that, of course, is heterosexuality.
Mm-mm.
But I couldn't find any historical data to back up the whole dyke was used to refer to
Right.
people who had a lack of attraction to men. What I have found is that the word dyke was used to refer to lesbians as far back as I believe the 1930s, 1940s.
Okay.
But the thing about that is that the word lesbian in the 1930s and the 1940s didn't mean what it meant today.
What did it
The
mean?
word lesbian just meant somebody who liked women. It didn't say exclusive attraction to women. So if you were a bisexual woman, you'd be a lesbian in the 1930s and
So it's
1940s.
basically how we use sapphic.
Yes. So the word
Okay.
lesbian before is how we use sapphic today. Actually, the word bisexual didn't come into common parlance and accepted parlance until the 1970s. So there was a solid 30, 40 years there where dyke was just women who liked women,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
sapphic. So ahistorical at best.
Right. Right. Like, because that's so interesting. Because you know how, if we're gonna go with the idea, na it's for there's a lack of attraction to men. Like, what do you mean by attraction? First and foremost, like, for example, me, it's like I'm sexually attracted to men and women, cisgendered or not, but I could only fall in love with women. So I'm romantically attracted to women, but I'm sexually attracted to men and women. So, like, how does that? Am I a dyke? Am I like emotionally a dyke? But you know what I mean? How do you? There's a lot of
Right?
like.
How do you, right? Like,
Mm-mm.
people who call you dyke on the street aren't going to be like, do you have a lack of attraction to men? And then you'd be like,
Dyke. Yeah.
yeah. And I'd be like, okay, dyke. They're not going to do that.
Right.
They're going to see you
Exactly.
holding hands with a woman, and then they're going to call you a dyke. So dyke at the time was also used to refer to toughness, like how we use
Mm,
butch today.
mm-mm,
So
mm-mm.
you like dyke wasn't necessarily like a femme lesbian. It was also, more butch masculine women. But
Mm-mm.
interestingly enough, male homosexuals at the time in the 70s and the 60s used to refer to themselves as dykes also, especially if they were like masculine
Mm.
male homosexuals. So like just looking at the history, it's really not what I think Tumblr Twitter discourse is saying. I have no clue where that's
Yeah.
come from. I don't
Yeah.
know where it started, but it's ahistorical. Now, I'm
Right.
not saying that, like it's just because I want to use the word dyke. I think that's another, I think, point of contention I have here with like when you're reclaiming slurs, oh, you can't reclaim that, you can't reclaim that because you're not this. And it's like sexuality is so fluid.
Super.
Like you're
Yeah.
not like not everyone is a lesbian for the rest of their life,
Mm-hmm.
or not
Mm-hmm.
everyone's a bisexual woman for the rest of their life. I
Right.
started out as a lesbian and then now I'm a bisexual woman. According to this discourse, because I am currently bisexual, does that negate the 10 years I spent as a lesbian and now I can't use the word
Mm.
dyke anymore?
Right.
Like
Right.
when does it end? But
I
I
like what
think,
And
Mark said.
yeah, go ahead.
oh yes.
I'm just gonna say that I like what Mark said. Reclaim what is true about you. That's it.
I like that. I like that. And you know
If
what?
you're a slut, you're a slut.
I agree with that because as what Trisha said, sexuality and gender, these things are so they're ever evolving and they're not written in stone. The same way I feel these terms. I won't even say slurs anymore. I just say terms because like at one point, as you said, it was like a whatever. It was a whatever term that became negative and became positive. It's like the same way like our sexuality and gender in itself is ever evolving. I feel these terms are also ever evolving. You know, and I feel as though there could come a time where like at one point we're gonna find power in this term. We're gonna reclaim this term. At one point it's gonna be something that is derogatory. Another point it's gonna be neutral. And parang given how these terms are just like these slurs, are slurs, right? These terms are slurs right now. I feel like the whole argument and the discourse around reclaiming it or not reclaiming it is something that doesn't really have an end. To answer your question, like where does it end? Because as you said, sexuality and gender are always going to be evolving. Same with the terms you're going to use to describe them will also be ever evolving, diba? So I guess there's not really an end to like who can reclaim, who cannot reclaim, because it's always going to be changing depending on context. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Well, everyone, that was our episode for Reclaiming Slurs. I hope y'all had a very good time listening in. But let's wrap up with some takeaways. What is like the number one thing you want to take away from this episode, or you want our listeners to take away?
Presh, you go first.
Uh, Thank you, Kai. For me, it's just a word can mean whatever you want it to mean. That's it. If you want it to empower you, then let it empower you. If you don't want to hear that word because it makes you feel bad, then tell people to fuck off.
Mm-hmm.
It's you give meaning to that word, and language changes, and the reason why language changes is because people just eventually said, okay, this is what this word means now. So
Yeah.
yeah,
How about you, Kai?
claim, yeah.
I think my greatest takeaway is what Mark just said. Like, I think I love what he just said, or whatever your pronoun is. Sorry, he, she, they. Um, we do not call a piece of lumber a tree. People and things change and are very fluid. Lumber from old barns that are falling down is highly valued and used for many things. It then is no longer called lumber. Like what he said about we don't call a piece of lumber a tree. People and things change and are very fluid. I think that's kind of what embodies like what my idea on this episode tonight. That it's always going to change. And to reclaim or to not claim as there is not it's not like you're all forever going to be like, this word is going to be negative to me forever. It might be, it might not. You don't know. We don't know. And I think that's kind of what I got from this tonight. Like, it's a very uncertain, fluid experience when it comes to these terms.
Awesome.
You,
Well,
Trisha.
My takeaway is that words have power,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, that power can be wielded against you, or you can wield it for yourself. You
Yes.
know, but aside from the discussion on slurs, I think no matter who you are, what you identify as, whatever slurs have been lobbed against you, or whatever slurs people say you can or cannot use, I think it's just good to use this whole discussion as a jumping off point to learn more about the history of these terms, like what I did with the word dyke. Like I really did a deep dive into that because I was so butthurt about not being able to use it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
just learn the history of these terms, learn why they became slurs in the first place, and then learn the other issues that the queer community struggles with. Because while we're debating on the verbal level, which is very, very important, there are so many other issues as well that we need to pay attention to. So arm yourself with information and proceed into the world. That's my advice. Okay, so before we say goodbye, let's open up the floor to questions from our customers. So for today's opening up, we have an anonymous letter, which give me 10 seconds to pull up because I have not actually done this before the show.
Kaya pala.
Yeah, I forgot to do it. Okay. So let's do something really, really easy and really, really quick. Help. All the girls I, straight male, meet are taken. That's today's opening up. There's no question. It's just help. All the girls I meet as a straight male are taken. I'm going to imply that there's a question here. What do?
What do? Oh no. Are taken, are taken. Where are you meeting these girls? It's a pandemic. Like, what?
Yeah, this was February of 2021. Girl, I mean, dude, where are you meeting
Where
these
are
girls?
you meeting
Tinder?
these girls?
Wait, if they're on Tinder,
Are they non-monogamous? Like, we have to take that. Well, Mr. Sir, Kuya, I think, first off, we need more context. Second, I think if it's bothering you so much that you can't, I think what's happening here, from what you just, from the very short things you said, is um, every girl you meet just somehow seems unavailable because they're taken, obviously. And if that's bothering you so much, maybe it's time to like take some time for yourself first. Maybe if it bothers you so much that every girl you meet is taken, and you can't find someone who isn't, that's out of your control, but what is in your control is kind of take a step back and see, like, do what like parang, what am I looking for? Like, what do I want? And all because all these girls are taken doesn't necessarily mean you're not gonna be successful, you know. I guess it just takes, you just need to take some time first to like figure out what you want for yourself, and whether or not try, basically what I'm saying is like focus on what you can control in the situation. If you can't control the girls
right.
you're meeting being taken, you can control how you could figure out what you want, what you don't want. And then once you get back out there and you finally find someone who matches your principles, your values, and your goals, woohoo.
Actually, what I'm getting from okay, I'm putting a lot of assumptions into this. It's
Right.
literally like 10 words, but my assumption here is that the girls that he meets that fit his criteria are all taken. That's what I'm getting the assumption of.
Okay.
But
I'm
also,
confused.
Mr. Kuya, sir, it is literally impossible that every girl you meet is taken. That's just like statistically impossible. So, my question, I'm instead of advice. Oh, actually, you know what? I'm gonna give advice here from Mark because Mark just said what I was about to say. If all the girls you meet are taken, by the way, again, statistically impossible, it is a need to question the energy he is putting out. We all have magnetic energy, and many do not understand it, so they attract what they do not want. And I know this sounds like magical juju, but it's honestly very, very true. Maybe the vibes that you're putting out, very the vibes, or maybe it's just like the girls you keep looking for are taken. because of other things that are usually associated with being taken, like emotional maturity. Not to say that everyone in relationships are emotionally mature, but at least they've had some practice and some experience. Um, or I don't know, maybe you're looking in the wrong places. Maybe
Yeah.
it's time to expand your criteria and like instead of just maybe you're putting such I'm actually doing the opposite of Kai because like Kai said, figure out what you want and go for it. I'm the opposite in this particular case. Release all of your expectations of what you want in a person and what you're looking for and just go out and meet people.
You know what?
Don't
That's a
have
good
the
one. That's a good
expectation
one. That's a good
of
one.
starting a relationship with them. Just
Mm-mm.
meet the
Mm-mm.
people that interest you. And because statistics are on your side, there is going to be a very high chance that one of them is going to be single eventually. So
And just to add, Mr. Kuya, sir, if we're going with the Trisha's, like Trisha said, na all the girls that fit your criteria are taken, wag kang mag-abangers, please. Like,
Mm.
don't.
don't, don't. Like, it's just, it's not gonna,
It's a
at
waste of
least in
time.
my experience, it's, yeah, you can use that time, you can spend that time looking for other people to start new connections with
Yeah. So
who
if
are
what
not
you're doing,
taken.
if what you're currently doing doesn't work, change it. That's pretty much it. That's our advice on this show. Okay, so if you'd like to send us your anonymous questions or confessions, you can submit through our now opening form. The link is in the description, and I'm leaving a link in the comments as well. So, a belated thanks to our sudden special guest, Nick, earlier.
Woohoo!
Unfortunately, we did not get to ask him if he wants to promote anything. So I'll just ask the two of you. Do you want to promote anything before we leave? That?
That's XOXCAI on Twitter and Instagram.
Fresh? No. Okay, I'm gonna take that as a no. All right. So you can follow me though on Twitter at Trisha O'Bannon. But more than that, stay updated with Now Open by following us on Facebook, Twitter, wherever else you have social media. We're at Now Open PH. Our past episodes are also available on YouTube, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Don't forget to join our Discord server to hang out with the host, fans, and friends of Now Open, and subscribe to our coffee page, www.coffee.com/nowopenph, to get bonus content and other special perks. So I'm excited to announce next week's episode for I think the third in our Pride Month series. Join us next Tuesday, same time and same place for Drag Herstory. So we're going to be looking at the history of drag, including local drag, and we may have a special guest. So stay tuned for that and see y'all's when we need. Wow, I can't believe we have like 2 seconds left and I messed that up. See you when we next open.
Bye, guys.